Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again. It is Saturday at 10 o'clock, 10:01. Happy Saturday. Happy weekend. Pretty nice day today. So, yeah, today's going to be, well, I had this really cool idea for a show, at least I think so. And it's going to be on a series, a TV series that I've done, I think, two shows on before. But I thought of a different way to approach talking about this series again, but in a different way. So I think it's kind of a cool idea. So today will be a first of a series of shows dedicated to my favorite television show of all time. But first off, I want to thank some of the folks that came out to our show last night at Hey Sailor with Quantum and the Button Men. Had a blast. We got to debut some new material, and it was a blast. It was usually with that band, we don't usually have a typical set list. We kind of like I usually work on the material a lot as much as I can, but we don't usually have a set list per se, just because I feel like I don't know. I like the vibe or the idea of trying to kind of play to the audience or just play to the vibe of the room or whatever's going on because a lot of the times it's so different, and we kind of want to try to create that energy, and then we also try to be open to receive that energy. So it's usually, as far as sets go, we don't usually have a set list. We usually just kind of, things will kind of unfold as they are for the most part. But last night was the first time that I more or less had a set list, at least in terms of like having three tunes back to back that were worked out, and some of the tunes are brand new, and then some of the tunes are older tunes. But we and they're long. They're kind of long pieces or long tunes, so they kind of lend itself to kind of creating, you know, if things are lined up, creating momentum or creating a vibe. So we did that last night for the first time, and that was it was really fun to be able to try out some new material and things I've been sitting on. It was kind of an idea I had of going into it because I had thought about doing that in past shows where, I was rehearsing a series of tunes, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna start with this one and segue into this next tune, and then so forth. And before I get to a gig, sometimes I think, okay, this is probably this will be where the starting point is. But 9 times out of 10, when we're set up and we're about to start, suddenly I have a different feeling of like how to start it, or I feel like the vibe in the room or the space doesn't quite match up to um, the order that I had. So I will kind of usually do something completely different. So, but last night was the first time where I kind of had this idea for these three tunes because I felt like, at least in the practice space in rehearsal mode, they they made a lot of sense back to back, and it was, I felt, at least at the time in my head when I was working on these tunes, that these three tunes kind of were pretty cohesive, and one of the tunes is a kind of a longer, kind of more just pure ambient piece, and the other tunes are a little bit more heavier dance oriented things, but they still have that vibe to them. And I thought in rehearsal mode, wow, this works pretty well. I think we could try this. So last night was the first time I ever really stuck to that, and we did it, and it was really fun. So I want to thank everyone for the support in live and local weird electronic music, and especially to the Button Men and all at Hey Sailor. And we also had a friend Dan Miller, who I play in a band with. He brought some percussion and sat in with us, and we played in that instrumentation, and we've never done that before, and that was a real fun kind of experiment. And he was really great. And so, yeah, looking forward to uh, booking some more shows here. We just booked a big festival coming up, so in the next couple of months there'll be a bunch of press for that. So stay tuned for that. I'm working on some other things right now as far as Quantum goes. But yeah, thanks again. So today's show is going to be on my favorite series, my favorite television show of all time. And for me, this TV show is so close to my heart, and I almost feel like this show. I almost feel like the way of or the idea of calling it a TV show is a little bit of a disservice in a weird way, because for me it like it plays like a movie. I can watch. I can pretty much watch this entire series right through, and it doesn't feel like a traditional TV show that way. It feels like it moves so quickly along the whole story, the way it unfolds, and it's got this incredibly slow burn pace to it, but it's so exciting and riveting at the same time. And that show, which is again, I can't say it enough, is and this show is my all-time favorite show. And again, I almost don't really even feel like calling it a television show, because for me it feels like just a pure cinematic experience. But that is the first season of True Detective. For me, pound for pound, this is my favorite television show slash movie of all time. I got this really beautiful Blu-ray collection of this movie or of this series about 5 or 6 years ago. Probably like 5 years ago. I got it on, yeah, at least 6 years ago, which is crazy. I got this at my history with this show is super deep and super vast. And what I'm going to do, like I've covered this series before. I believe I have two different videos on this channel about True Detective. More so of where I watched the show and then I did my usual kind of synopsis or my feelings about the show and the history around it and all those kinds of things. But what I decided to do last night is I was thinking of, I'm always thinking and brainstorming of like some new shows that I want to try or some new ideas for shows. The idea that I had and what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, I'm going to do a video on each episode of this amazing, amazing series, which I haven't done before. So this will be, a lot more in depth, and I will be covering episode per episode and trying to handle it that way, which compared to say the other videos that I've done on True Detective season 1 is pretty different. So my history with this show is pretty incredible. I've seen this show so many times. It's I can't even count. I can't even really count the amount of times I've seen it. It premiered on HBO in 2014, and I did not see this show. I didn't first see True Detective until maybe about about 3 or 4 years after it had come out, and I kind of saw it on a whim. This, of course, like I said, this is an HBO. This was an HBO series, and I was very kind of late to the game with watching this show. I was aware. I had heard some things about the show. I knew it was on HBO at the time in 2014 when it came out, and I heard some good things about it. I heard some quiet voices in the distance saying that this show was something else, like kind of a marvel of a show. And for whatever reason, I did not pay attention to it as deeply as I should have, really, in hindsight. And so after this show came out, and then it was put out on DVD, and then eventually Blu-ray. It came out on DVD first, and it's hard to believe that this came out in 2014 already. I mean, so it's pretty old, but it came out on DVD at first, and then I think a couple of years later, it was released on Blu-ray, and I think you can get it on 4K now. And back when I eventually saw this show, there used to be a really great video store in Camden, Maine, which is Camden, Maine is about 10 or 15 minutes away from my house, and it's a little kind of coastal town. But there used to be this really awesome video shop called Harbor Audio Video, which was basically a video rental place. And at that time, I had multiple memberships. I had a membership to Opera House Video, which is still exists and is the only video store in the entire state, which is insane. And I had a membership to Harbor Audio Video, which has been deceased for many years at this point. And then I also had a membership to Movie Gallery, which was in Belfast, and that is dead and buried as well. Opera House Video is a mom and pop, independent store. Harbor Audio Video was a mom and pop, for the most part, independent store, but it did have a lot of money behind it. It was kind of run like a corporation, but it was technically an independent business. Movie Gallery was, of course, a big giant franchise, but the reason I started going to Harbor Audio Video, well, I was down at that time in 2013, 2014, 2015. My girlfriend at the time lived in Camden, so I was spending a lot of time in Camden, and they had a membership to Harbor Audio Video, so I would go down to her place, and she had also a teenage daughter. They would go to Harbor Audio Video all the time to rent their movies because it was literally directly across the street. So they would walk over to the video shop, and so when I was there a lot, we would go into Harbor Audio Video, and I knew of that place here and there anyway, but I never had a membership, and I remember going in there more and more often with my girlfriend at the time and her daughter, and was like, wow, like this place is kind of awesome. They had one of the things that stood out about Harbor Audio Video was that they had a really spectacular foreign film selection. And as well as having just an amazing selection for foreign films, they also had a really massive documentary selection. And at that time, um, I was watching a shit ton of documentaries. I still love documentaries. I don't watch them. I don't stay up on them as much as I used to. I own quite a few. I've covered. I've done quite a few shows on docs on this channel, and I do love that art form, that medium. It's a very special. It's a very special kind of subgenre for me. And at that time, I was really steeped in that, and so. And it's in regards to foreign films, massive foreign film fan. Technically, I watch probably foreign films more than American films overall, more pertaining to the world of exploitation, but I consider those to be foreign movies in a lot of ways, even though they're not like traditional movies. But so that when I went to Arbor Video, I noticed those two sections. I was just like, wow, like this is killer. They also had a really good, or pretty solid, I should say, horror section. And so I started renting movies there all the time. And I was also, I had a gig with a jazz group that I had at the time down in Thomaston on, uh, which was like a monthly or bi-monthly gig. And so I was always passing through Camden on Sundays anyway, and I would always stop in there, and I got a membership there, and I started renting movies there, and then I also worked in Camden at the time too, so I was in Camden a lot. So I got a membership there, and I started renting movies there, and then I came across True Detective. I saw it had been out for a couple of years, and I saw it in the aisle under the new releases for TV shows, and I believe it was somebody I worked with. I think his name was Wes. When I used to work at the Camden Teen Center. Somebody I worked with who was really into movies too, and he had really good taste. He was really into a lot of great horror films and movies that were pretty dark, and and he, he turned me on to some really awesome movies like Ex Machina, The Babadook, The Witch. He was the first guy he's like, he had seen those movies before me. He's like, you should check those movies out. And then he had recommended the first season of True Detective. He said it was just like spectacular. So I rented it, and I rented the whole first season, and I was just, my jaw dropped. I was just blown the fuck away by it, and it was just like instantly my favorite television show. And I think I watched it the first time I watched it. It was on DVD, and I watched it by myself. And I pretty much, again, it's a compared to most television shows that exist now, it's pretty short. It's probably roughly 6 7 hours, and it's got a beginning, a middle, and a definitive end. It's not, there's no bullshit kind of cliffhanger where you gotta like watch 10 seasons to find out what is going on, or what this dark secret is. It's like, it kind of plays off as like one and done, but it's got a very definitive ending. And so it's really unique in the television world, because nowadays that does not happen. So I watched it pretty much straight through when I got it, and I was just like, wow, this is incredible. This is everything that I want to see in a movie, and then also in a television show. And so, and I believe I watched it the first time by myself, and then that following weekend or something, I had told my girlfriend at the time about the show, and she was also into movies. We used to watch a lot of movies together, and she also was into movies that had a little bit of a darker kind of vibe to them. And I told her about this show, and I was like, this is like the greatest thing ever. We should watch it. So I remember I re-rented it. I think it was like the following week. And we sat one over the course of a Saturday and Sunday night or whatever. We sat and watched it right through again, and I was just like, I enjoyed it even more, and I was just so kind of dumbfounded on how great this show was. And my girlfriend at the time, she was like, yes, this is like the best thing. This is just incredible. So, and then probably about a year or two later, I was in Bull Moose Music in Brunswick, Maine, which is a smaller shop for the Bull Moose franchises or shops. It's there's like about 5 or 6 locations here in Maine, and there is, well, including New Hampshire, or yeah, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. which is the main one, and I believe was the first one. But there's a bull moose in Brunswick, Maine, which is about, it's a hike from here, but from Camden it's like an hour or so, or a little bit more. And I was in Brunswick at the bull moose, and that bull moose is actually really really great. They have an awesome selection. I don't go there as often because it's it's like a half hour from Portland, so it's a hike. But anytime I'm down in an area, I do stop there. But they have an amazing selection, and it's a smaller shop compared to the other ones. But when I was in there at that time, I came across True Detective, but it was Blu-ray, and I was like, oh fuck yes, and I was so pumped, and it was really cheap. It was, I don't even think it was used. It was still wrapped, and so I picked it up, and I was just like yes, because I had only seen it on DVD, and so I was like this series is so the visual and the aesthetics are so powerful in this movie. The cinematography is just amazing. The music is just incredible. I was like, yes, this is a definite must own on Blu-ray. So I picked it up and I immediately watched it, and I was just like, yes, this is the best shit ever. And then I did the same thing again with that same girlfriend, and we watched it again. And since then, I have watched this so many times I can't even really count. And so I decided to watch it again last night, and that's what cured this, or not cured, but gave me this idea of curating a video series differently, where I'm going to talk about each particular episode. And again, this came out in 2014. Amazing cast, Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey. This series single-handedly made me into a really big Matthew McConaughey fan. I think he is extraordinary in this series. I've always loved Woody Harrelson from for years, and I think this series is probably the best thing that Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey have ever done in their career. I think their the roles that they play and the complexity to their roles and their characters is is just genius. Yeah, I just think it's so incredible. Their characters are so complex, and yet they are so there's so much you have. For me, I had so much empathy towards them, and I cared about them, even though they also had some really dark baggage, that they were also dealing with. And I again, like I said, I always loved Woody Harrelson, but when I saw this show with Matthew McConaughey, I was like, wow, he has got so much more ability than I ever thought was, that I ever thought he was capable of. I was just enamored with it. It came out in 2014, and so today's show is going to be on the first episode called "The Long Bright Dark." The basic synopsis for this kind of introduction to the show is former Louisiana state partners Rustin Kane, or Rustin Cole, and Martin Hart give statements in to a pair of investigators about a murder that had happened in the past, of a prostitute that took place 17 years later. This show, and basically this is obviously the introduction to the series, and they do such a great job with introducing you to these characters, Russ and Martin, played by Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. And they basically are two investigative cops who, FBI agents who are put in charge of this incredibly bizarre and kind of horrific crime. And from the minute that the show starts, it is just, I just get so absorbed in the mystery of this show. And it has. I definitely think it has. It's a crime drama. It has horror elements. It's incredibly gut wrenchingly suspenseful. There's a kind of a really cool cult element to the crimes and the or this murder in particular. The music was composed and curated by T Bone Barnett, an amazing musician. The cinematography for this show is absolutely amazing. It's so powerful that it acts like a character. And it's again, this is like one of the greatest like introductions to a series because it just oozes with darkness and sensuality. And the other thing that's so awesome about this series is that it is more or less told in real time. And the way that the series opens of where we're now seeing these characters 17 years after this whole case, and they're going back to re-examine what really happened, and all of these other kinds of theories that have come out in the last 17 years. And we're introduced to Russ and Martin, played by these incredible actors. So the way the narrative is explained and the way it's laid out is just so original, and it's just brilliant. It's just so and again the thing that I love about the show is it is told in real time. When you get to the actual case, it is told in real time, and it follows these murders over the span of 17 years. And you see these incredible arcs that all of these characters go through. It's unbelievable, but it's the pacing of it is very slow. It's a slow burn thriller, crime drama. Um, it's incredibly dark, but that's what I love about it. Brilliant direction. The cinematography is just so incredible. It all takes place in New Orleans, and it's got this incredibly kind of spooky vibe throughout the entire series. It was written by Nick Pizzolatto, who is, I think, just a literary genius. The script, the writing for this series, again, is just like it's incredibly poetic and just so thought provoking. It's yeah, it's and so it's got this grittiness to it. It's pure genius. It was also directed by Kari Joji Fukunaga, who directed fairly recently one of the later James Bond films with Daniel Craig. But the direction, the cinematography for this movie, it is simply spectacular. And again, I think that this is, as far as like the when it comes to the opening, the introduction to these characters into the story, um, it is the most riveting thing I've ever seen, and the the most um, some of the most beautiful writing also, and the level of suspense from just the beginning, and the empathy that you have towards the characters, like you instantly care about everything that's happening, the characters, and you get a sense that there is such an underlining darkness to what's going on. And just that scene of when they first come across to they first come to the crime scene, it's unbelievable, and it's truly disturbing and unsettling. And again, it the whole story just raises all kinds of questions about everything, and it's one of the best introductions ever to a series. And so stay tuned. My next video will be about episode 2 in the for True Detective season 1, the greatest show ever. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.